Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today we are reviewing the Fiio M11 Plus Digital Audio Player, or DAP for short. A $700 US product that was loaned to me by Apos Audio. So Apos Audio, again, they sent this to me for review. They have made no attempt to influence my opinion about it one way or the other. And so the link to their website below for this product will be an affiliate link. All right, so just really quickly, this is a little bit different product than I have reviewed on this channel before. So let me just set this up a little bit and then we'll do the shameless self-promotion thing. So again, this is a digital audio player. For those who might be unfamiliar with this product category, this is essentially what iPods became, more or less. So it's it's like an iPod thing where it is a music player. But most of them these days have Wi-Fi built in so that you can do streaming from Tidal or Qobuz or Spotify or other music apps like that. And most of them are also based off of the Android operating system. This one is too, to be able to do that. And then of course they definitely focus more on audio quality, higher quality DACs, higher quality mobile amps in them. And the ability to get around some of the Android operating system's stock limitations placed on audio. So that's all in here. That's what this is. This particular unit that is sent to me, again, the Fiio M11 Plus, has 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's got a Snapdragon processor in it. It has 64 gigabytes of internal memory. It has a micro SD card slot for expanding memory that way. And let's see, it has an ESS-based DAC chip in there. And let's see, it decodes almost everything 2-channel audio save MQA. That is one decoding feature that is not in here. And then it features a THX mobile amp module. All right, so I will unpack all of that and talk more about the features and all of that here in a little bit. But for right now, I think it is appropriate to dive into that shameless self-promotion. Then we'll come back and have a different vantage point for the camera where I will talk more about the features of this thing. All right, so let's get into that. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. I thought this vantage point might be a little bit easier to show off some of the features and the accessories, at least the important accessories, I think, that come with the M11 Plus. So, I mean, here's the unit itself. And let's just look at that for a minute. We'll get to accessories here in just a moment. And so, the unit itself is, I mean, it's pretty simple, pretty plain and all that. I mean, well, I call it that, but actually it looks pretty sharp, I think. All of the stuff there, like the Fiio, I don't know how well this shows up on camera, but there's like this diamond reflector, triangular, different polygons of reflectiveness on this back panel and all of that. And then there's like nothing on the top. We of course have the touch screen on the front. On the side panel here, we have transport functions, okay, transport buttons. Sorry, I'm noticing, of course, all kinds of little bits of dirt and hair and just all that kind of stuff because that happens with use. Anyway, we have the transport functions here. We've got track change, like track, I think, forward, backward, play, pause, okay, that sort of thing. Here we have hold, on and off. Like, seriously, there's a little piece of something stuck in here. Okay, probably a dog hair. All right, anyway, it's gone now. And a hold button here on this panel, and then this right here, I don't know how well you can see that, I will open it here in a moment, is the micro SD slot. Okay, on the bottom we have all of the inputs and outputs. We've got 4.4 millimeter Pentacon balanced. Here we have 2.5 millimeter balanced TRRS output. We have the USB-C port, that is for both data and charging, and then we have the 3.5 millimeter, and this is a multifunction 3.5 millimeter output. It can be a single-ended headphone output, or it can be a coaxial SPDIF output on there as well. These two outputs over here, actually I think all of the outputs, analog outputs anyway, are switchable via software setting between being a headphone output, so being a powered output, or at least a headphone powering output, and also being a line out, so that you can just use this as a DAC and transport if you wish. The other side, we have a power button for press hold, okay, on there, and then this right here is a touch sensitive panel for adjusting volume up and down by sliding up and down, and then you can also press it up or down to change the volume like by one step instead of swiping quickly for many. And then this is a button that I don't remember. I will have to look that up. I don't think I really ever used it, honestly. Okay, yeah, didn't even realize it was there, so whatever it does, I didn't use. So there's that. Okay, some of the accessories then. It ships with this fairly nice carrying case here that leaves open this part here for the touch panel, and then you can push through the leather for like the transport buttons and all that, and then it leaves open this hole here for the transport, or no, excuse me, the hold on off switch, and then this bottom flap here flaps over that, and then it still exposes the inputs and outputs and that sort of thing on it there. The one complaint that I have about this case is that it covers the micro SD slot. So if you need to swap out the single micro SD slot on the fly, you've got to take the case off. And trust me, when this thing has been sitting in the case for a while, it sticks in there good. Discovered that when I was like wrapping up this review. It's like, okay, it's time to get my own personal micro SD card out of there. And boy, did I have a lot of trouble getting the case off. Okay. All right, some of the other accessories other than the case, the important ones I think, because there are some fairly standard things, is this little adapter doohickey right here that has a 3.5 millimeter TRRS connector on this end, and then a female RCA coax SPDIF connector here basically. So if you want to use the 3.5 millimeter output here as a coax SPDIF digital output, you need this adapter, or at least one that is identical, because the coax output only worked with a TRRS connector on this end. If you try to use a TS connector here, which I did initially, it won't work. So the way it's wired up in there, you need to use the TRRS. Other adapters I have used in the past have been fine with TS, but this one isn't. Okay, so keep that in mind if you want to use this as a transporter to connect to an external DAC at some point, that is an issue. All right, the micro SD card slot, okay, you need this little key. That's what this is. This is the key to open the micro SD card slot. And so ergonomically, and you pop it in there, okay, and it comes out, and it is this little micro SD tray, right? Card sits in there, and then you sit it in there. Okay, so it's nice that it has a micro SD card slot, because many of us have large libraries, particularly if we are buying a product like this. Okay, and I think the internal memory it's either 128 gig or 256, which isn't tiny, but it's not gonna hold a whole lot in terms of a FLAC library ultimately. I have a 512 gig micro SD card that I use to test this, and that worked okay. But anyway, like, I want to show that because, again, once you put this thing in the case, right, and you close it up like this, okay, not only do you need the tool to access the micro SD card slot, like the micro SD card slot is covered up, like you can't get to it with this case on anymore. So if one micro SD card, and what do they top out at these days? 1 terabyte, maybe 2 terabytes. So I mean, if you have an enormous FLAC library or DSD library or whatever that you like to take with you that doesn't fit on one micro SD card, swapping out micro SD cards on this is not straightforward. Okay, contrast that with my personal DAP, the KN-N6 Mark II that I use the EO2 module on. The micro SD card slot on there, first of all, the stock carrying case, they put a little cutout in, and then also it's easy to pop this in and out and switch it out on the fly. Okay, so that is one difference between these two. All right, other than that, I mean, they're built differently, so I will say that in terms of like carrying this around, it is a little bit bigger, okay, at least in terms of height and width, but it may not show up here very well, but it's not as deep, like it's not as thick as the N6 Mark II. So one advantage I will say that the Fiio has over the KN is that I think the Fiio fits in a pocket a little more comfortably, at least I found that to be the case. Okay, yeah, so that's one thing there. So other than that, I mean, you can see like this one's got this turning wheel for volume, and this is also a button for power on, off, wake up, you know, those kinds of things, all that. So I mean, they are a little bit different devices. Now in terms of usability, because I think usability of a DAP is important. Okay, you can see my hand size. I don't have particularly large hands. This thing is almost as big as my hand, so if I like have this thing set on hold, so again that hold switch is right here, and I'm holding it, and I'm like, oh wait, I just pulled it out of my pocket, I need to turn hold off. Doing that with one hand, doing that with one hand is a bit of an exercise for me. Okay, now you might, if you have larger hands than me, you might not have that issue. Okay, here, right, let me turn the unit on here real quick. So anyway, that is a thing that I noticed usability-wise with this unit, is it doesn't fit my hand particularly well, at least in terms of like using the physical buttons and the touching parts on the outside. I mean, having small hands and small fingers helps with a small touchscreen, of course, but not this part. Okay, so we see a little bit long-ish warm-up sequence here. Okay, come on, swipe. Touch panel, oh, I had the hold on. Ha, that's why it was disabled. There we go, and we're in. One thing that I noticed here, I couldn't get the clock to keep the right time. This is an hour ahead of what the time is in my actual time zone right now. I had it set correctly when I first set everything up, and then it changed. Don't know why. Just did. Okay, but what I wanted to do here is just show the touch volume mostly, right? So you can change it somewhat quickly there with the touch, or you can just push it and it will change by a single unit, either up or down there. And then interestingly, you can also do this via touchscreen. And then another thing is like it goes up to 120, which is to me an odd number. It's very speedometer-like. Very speedometer-like in a car, like to get that kind of thing going on. So I don't know what's going on with that. All right. I think that's probably good for commenting on the usability. Oh, it's a multi-step process to shut this thing down. Push and hold power, hit shutdown, hit shutdown again. And there it will go. All right, I think that's enough for this view. I will come back to on-face camera to talk about other features if needed and to talk about sound. All right, so let's switch over to that. Real quick before we get into the sound of this unit, I do want to talk about one kind of usage quirk that I noticed. And that is like, so I own the KN-N6 Mark II DAP, and I have the EO2 module installed in it. And I saw in the clip that you just saw, I talked about how the micro SD card in the KN is much more easy to swap in and out based on how this thing is built. So like, because I had the KN DAP and I had that 512 gigabyte micro SD card in it, what I would often do if I would get more music is I would just plug the KN in via USB to my PC and then just transfer those music files directly to the DAP that way. What I observed when I plugged that micro SD card here into the Fiio is that it didn't like the file management system that the KN was using in some way, because it did not recognize any music files that had been transferred to the N6 Mark II directly when I plugged the the N6 Mark II into the PC via USB. It did recognize all of the files that I had transferred to the micro SD card when I had the micro SD card plugged into a card reader that is connected via USB to my PC. It recognized all of those, but like that's all the music that I dumped on that micro SD card when I first got the micro SD card before I ever plugged it into the N6. Right? So for whatever reason, the file management system is different there. So I had to go back, wipe that memory card clean, retransfer all of my music files to that micro SD card again, and then the Fiio recognized them. And that happened with Fiio's built-in music app that's on here, and it also happened with USB Audio Player Pro. Okay, so either app there, that thing happened of not recognizing files that were transferred directly using the KN, but was okay with files transferred directly using either the M11 Plus or plugging the micro SD card directly into a little USB card reader plugged into my PC. Okay, just a little quirk there. Oddly enough, when I was basically done with this review and I took my micro SD card back out of here and I put it back into the KN just said, hey, this micro SD card seems formatted a little bit differently. Do you want to scan it for music files? And I said, okay. And it took off and it recognized everything. So I don't know what's going on there. Just thought that I would report on that. Okay, sound. So the sound that you get here, so I will talk about what I used the test gear that I used for this to test it as a DAP, as a portable player. I did a fair amount of listening with two sets of IEMs, the Mangard TV1 and the DUNU Vulkan. I have a review up for the Mangard T, which I will post a link to. I am working on a review of the DUNU Vulkan right now that may or may not be out before this one goes up. If it is, I will link to it. Otherwise, keep an eye out for that in the near future. Okay, and then I used two full-size headphones for a fair amount of testing. Those would be the Focal Radiance and the Hi-Fi Min Ananda Stealth Magnet Edition. And I chose those two because they are fairly easy driving, and then of course they are of different type. The Radiance being a dynamic driver and the Ananda Stealth being a planar. So those four I used for serious evaluation of the sound quality of this thing as a full-featured DAP. I did a little bit plug in things like the Odyssey MM500, ZMF Atrium, like those sorts of things, just to see how well those things would do off of a portable device. And since this one was all set up and ready to go, that's what I used to test those briefly. All right, I also tested the SPDIF functionality, the output of the 3.5 millimeter here, using the adapter cable you saw in the clip a few moments ago, and that was plugged in via coax to my Cord Hugo 2, again, just to kind of test this as a transport. And then, let's see, what else is in there? I know there's one other thing. Oh, the DAC. I tested just DAC performance as compared to the KN-N6 Mark II by just using a 4.4 millimeter Pentacon to dual 3-pin XLR adapter cable, running that into my Vielectric HPA V281, and then since I'm also reviewing them, the Dan Clark Audio Stealth, or not, that's not the Stealth. I knew I was going to do that at some point. The Dan Clark Audio Expanse, excuse me, okay, just because I'm reviewing that one and getting to know it fairly well now, I use that to just test the DAC functionality of the M11 Plus on its own. Okay, so what did all of that tell me? So the functionality of the device here, I know I said sound, we'll get there in just a moment, but like the Snapdragon processor, the 4 gig of RAM, all of that, like if you're just going to use this as a transport and use the digital output, everything is going to go really smooth for you once it recognizes the music files. I mean, the usability, it's Android based, so if you're familiar with the Android operating system at all, it's a breeze. Even if you're not familiar with the Android operating system, it's fairly easy to learn. Okay, so that's all there. And then the speed, everything opens up quickly, everything starts playing quickly. The touch screen is nice and responsive. You tap something and it takes off and runs pretty quickly. So that part is nice with the with a new processor, plenty of RAM for audio purposes and all of that. No complaints there. That was all good. The SPDIF output, sound performance, fine. Like it sounds really good as a digital transport music source. Plugging it into my Hugo 2 and listening to anything off of that I wanted to. I think I even plugged that into my speakers at one point. My speaker system, I should say. Sounded great. No complaints there. Okay. The DAC performance alone on here, very neutral, very clean, very detailed, not particularly big in staging, but does a good job with positional effects, imaging, separation, that sort of thing. It is not quite as good as of a pure DAC as my N6 Mark II with the EO2 module. But the N6 Mark II was a $1,200 unit when it was first on sale, and then the EO2 module was like another $400 beyond that, if that's what you wanted. So even though this unit is 3-4 years older than the M11 Plus at this point, that price difference I think still matters a little bit in terms of bottom line sound quality from the DAC. But even so, the DAC output of this, setting the 4.4 millimeter balanced to line out and then running it through my Fiio amp and then using these DCA expanse, it sounded good, right? I had no real complaints there. I thought the DAC performance was really solid considering all that is packed into this unit. So no complaints there either. Now I keep framing this as having no complaints to this point, but I'm about to drop one. And that is the amp portion in this. It is a fine unit, all things considered, except for the amplifier section. And that's where it really falls down, and that is unfortunate because if you're going to use this as a DAP, as an on-the-go device, powering IEMs or powering headphones, whatever, that's a really critical function. And unfortunately, the DAC in here, again, it's a THX amp tech. It's plagued by the same kinds of problems that plagued the early THX desktop amps, like the 789, right? The Drop 789, or the early SMSL SP200, things like that, where the staging in particular is just kind of flat, and the sound is just very dull and sterile and kind of lifeless. Now there's plenty of power there. Like it's got good power for an on-the-go amplifier. From a driver control standpoint, it did just fine, even with the full-size headphones of the Radiance and the Ananda Stealth. Okay, that was okay. It's just there's not a whole lot of sound staging. The sound staging is also very flat, very wall of sound-ish. Now, it doesn't have the treble harshness and sharpness to the degree that the 789 and the SP200 did. Okay, again, those early THX in there. But it's also not great in that regard either. So that is also there. And plus, there's a little bit of just lack of mid-bass presence. Like, it was weird. When I first started listening to the DUNU Vulkan, I was on vacation. I took the M11 Plus with me to Rocky Mountain National Park, because that's where we went on vacation this past summer. And took that with me, and the DUNU Vulkan. And when I was first listening to the DUNU Vulkan there, I was like, this is kind of weird. There's a lot of really deep sub bass. And then there was like a dip in the mid bass. And so there was sub bass, then very low mid bass, and then the mids, and then a somewhat kind of sharp, brittle treble going on. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And at first I blamed the Vulkan. And then when I got home and I got plugged the Vulkan into other amps, like the Radsound Ear Studio 100, which I take to the gym with me, okay? And took the Vulkan with there, or I plugged or using my Chord Hugo 2, or plugged the Vulkan into like the Lake People G111 amp, like those sorts of things. Like then its sound filled out, and it sounded much, much better. Plugging it into the EO2 module of the KN, much better, much more full, much more rich, much better staging, much more texturing, like all of that kind of stuff. Okay, the Vulkan just really came to life. And so that's what I mean. It's like, it's just, the amp in here is a little bit lacking in the mid bass. It's flat and kind of mushy in its staging. And it's just kind of dull and lifeless, unfortunately. The Radiance sounded okay on it. Because the Radiance is just a warm, thick headphone to begin with, it handled that mid-bass recess in here okay. But I mean, all of the spatial things, of the flat sound staging and all of that were still a problem on that headphone. Okay, so that was in there too. Now, so then let's talk about, like, do I recommend this product? That's tough. I think you could make a case, maybe, that because of its speediness and its responsiveness to controls and all of that, because the DAC performance is reasonably strong, and because you have the coax output and it works just fine as a transport, if you need a DAP to primarily be a DAC or a transport, I would say not just a transport. Let's just go with the DAC, because that at least is an extra feature that this will use then. If you need a DAP that can function as a DAC and your music player, this is pretty good. Okay? It's pretty good there. And then if you're going to only occasionally use it as a mobile amp and you have a very warm, thick IEM or headphone that this could comfortably drive to pair with it, and you're not really worried about the staging aspects for whatever reason, then I think that would be a good use case for it. That's kind of it though. Like the underperformance of the amp here is a problem. It's a problem. Okay. And, you know, a fair criticism of my review of any DAP right now is that I have not heard a ton of DAPs, because I really haven't. I have heard a fair number of mobile amps though. Like I have that little Radsound ES100 that I mentioned. Really like that little guy. Okay, I've got this KN. I have owned in the past the iFi Hip DAC version 1. The Fiio E18, if you remember that one. The Topping NX4 DSD, I had that one for a while. Let's see, what else did I have in there? I had that little Monoprice Monolith USB dongle DAC. Anyway, I have had a number of small little OTG amplifiers, and they all sounded better than the amp part of this. So that's where I'm going to draw some experience from and say, you know what, I think even at this price and even jamming all of these features into a $700 unit, we can still reasonably expect better from the amplifier. Okay, so I will go ahead and leave it there. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Fiio M11 Plus DAP. Please remember to leave a like and a subscribe, and check out my PayPal, check out my Patreon, and do all of those things that you do to help support YouTube channels. And as always, enjoy the music.